Take that Boulderama, take that Convenient Smart, take that nuclear power plant. Ooh, fiddlesticks.
Yes! It's now time to talk about the dastardly bastards of Springfield. The ones who are a menace to the heroes. The ones who add a spice of life to the show. And make Springfield that much more interesting. It's time to talk about the Springfield villains. Villains come in all forms and sizes. Whether they're over-the-top supervillains, who cause panic in the masses, or heartless monsters who terrorize only the few. Or we just have complete psychopaths. What's wrong with you? Now for this list there are some ground rules I have to cover. First, this is a list of villains, not antagonists. Take the likes of Rex Banner for example. He was a massive antagonist to Homer and the town, but he was a man just enforcing the law, which is what he was brought in to do by Mayor Quimby. He's not a corrupt cop, or one who takes policing too far. Hence, he's not a villain. So you aren't going to see people like this on the list. Or someone like Frank Grimes, who was a great antagonist to Homer, but not a villain. And if you think tricking Homer to enter a kids contest is enough to be on this list, you have no idea what you're in for. Another thing I want to mention is when it comes to one-time villains. I will be judging them based on several criteria. First, the sheer level of villainy, of course. Next is how significant they are to the plot of their episode. Like take the character Julia for example. She was an obsessive fan of Homer who tried to seduce him and eventually tried to kill him. She definitely has villain points for this list. But she was only introduced in the third act, and wasn't even alluded to prior. So while villainous, someone like this won't be on the list. And lastly, I just have to find him to be an interesting or fun villain. For example, there's an episode where a mysterious character is trying to constantly murder Homer, leaving the Simpsons to team up with Sideshow Bob to find out who this would-be killer is. And it's revealed to be Frank Grimes Jr.? Yeah, that was the flaming reveal, and was way more confusing than interesting. Mainly because Frank Grimes did not look old enough to be this man's father. So yeah, Frank Grimes Jr. isn't on this list. The last rule I want to mention is I'm not including anyone from the Treehouse of Horror, because everyone in Springfield has been a villain at some point in those, often trying to murder others, and succeeding. So no Treehouse characters, but I will give some Treehouse of Horror honorable mentions, starting with of course Kang and Kodos. They're practically the mascots of Treehouse of Horror, and have conquered the earth at least once. They were also the main villains of the Simpsons Hit and Run game. But of course that was a video game and not part of the show. Another Treehouse honorable mention is the Puka Duke. This monster might be one of the most terrifying things ever presented in The Simpsons. In one of the only actually scary Treehouse segments, where it possesses Marge and tries to force her to murder Maggie of all people. Yes, this thing tried to get a mother to kill her baby. How's that Frank Grimes villainy of tricking Homer looking now? And the last Treehouse honorable mention is Devil Flanders. Because come on, it's the devil. We're talking about the bad guys of The Simpsons. It has to get an honorable mention. Now I want to give a couple of non-Treehouse honorable mentions. First is Itchy, who is the biggest psychopath on the show, and might have the largest kill count, of mainly Scratchy. But Itchy is only a cartoon character on the show, and has only interacted with other people during Treehouse episodes. Next is Hans Sprungfeld, a murderous pirate who tried to kill George Washington. Yeah, that's worth a mention. And lastly is Dr. Colossus, because he's one of the few actual supervillains depicted on the show. And this was just funny.
Officers, you have arrested an innocent man.
Really? Oh, jeez. All right, Colossus, you're free to go. But stay away from Death Mountain. But all my stuff is there.
And that's all the honorable mentions. But before I get to the list, I would like to give a shout out to the Thundering Hammer, who suggested this video idea. So thank you to them. And if you have any suggestions for a video, let me know in the comments. Let's see what you can come up with. Now without further ado, here are the top 20 greatest Simpsons villains. Let's go. Number 20 is Patty and Selma. While they have been presented as a nuisance to Homer since their inception, we have seen their more softer and sensitive sides. mostly from Selma, who is often depicted as a sad woman looking for love, and these instances put them lower on this list. But the reason they're on this list in the first place is because these two are far from good people. They have been shown to kidnap people, extort Homer, and on more than one occasion try to break up their sister's family. But these pale in comparison to two moments in particular. First, Patty and Selma abducted Homer and put him in a Saw-like torture room, where they proceed to torture him, while laughing the whole time. Now, is it the worst torture they could have done? No. But it's still messed up. However, this isn't the worst thing they have ever done, as they flat out tried to murder Homer. Yeah, that happened. Of course, Homer survived this, after he predicted he might jump off this bridge, and asked his friends to get him a bouncy castle. But it's real, Patty and Selma didn't know about the castle. They were just trying to murder Homer. So yeah, they get on the list. Number 19 is Nelson Muntz. Nelson is a common villain for the kids in Springfield. And while Patty and Selma have done worse things, Nelson is more often depicted in a villainous role. He is arguably the worst bully in school, who will often mock, threaten, extort, and beat up children. To the point, in one episode, all the kids teamed up together to attack Nelson. But the reason he isn't any higher is because there are a lot of episodes that show Nelson as just a troubled kid with a bad home life, causing him to lash out at others, which of course puts this pansy lower on the list. So yeah, Nelson had to be on this list, but he can't be that high. Number 18 is the Bullies, consisting of Jimbo, Kearney, and Dolph. While the show will depict Nelson in a sympathetic light, more often than not, that is not the case for these three. They are more commonly the go-to choice when the show needs a menace at the school. These kids are thieves, vandals, kidnappers, and won't keep off the damn grass. One of the worst things they've ever done is almost get Ned Flanders killed, after relentlessly harassing him and chasing him for hours on end, eventually chasing him to a zoo, where baboons nearly ended his life. But the worst thing they've ever done were their roles at Camp Krusty, where they were the tormentors of the camp for children. The reason they aren't any higher is they are still just children, even though Kearney's age fluctuates on a joke-by-joke basis. But yeah, they're just kids in the end. And of course, boys will be boys.
Judge Snyder, motion to declare a writ of boys will be boys.
Motion granted. Case dismissed.
Number 17 is the Grumple. This is a character who for months on end would get into fights with Homer, where he tried to kill him, even at one point coming to his house to threaten his life.
Grumpily, grumpily, groo. Your blood will make my stew.
But of course, the worst thing he did was steal all the holiday cheer, and refused to give it back even when his life was threatened. A true villain indeed. The Grumple isn't higher on this list. Well, because he didn't really do much. He was really only in the subplot of the episode he was in, but he was the best part of that episode. And he's not higher on this list because he made up with Homer in the end. That son of a bitch. He could have been Homer Simpson's equivalent to Peter Griffin's chicken, but no, he had to make up with him. You're lucky you're on this list at all. But I'm fairly confident saying he's worse than Patty and Selma or the school bullies. Number 16 is Lucille Bukowski, aka Miss Botts, aka the Babysitter Bandit. This character was infamous for posing as a babysitter before tying up the children and robbing the family blind. She was so notorious she was on the Simpsons version of America's Most Wanted. And fun fact, her episode was the first Simpsons episode ever produced, so she can be considered the first ever Simpsons villain. While she was an infamous burglar and probably traumatized children, she is mostly just a thief, and thievery is a lesser action compared to what a lot of other people have done on this list. Number 15 is Malloy, aka the Springfield Cat Burglar. This man is a master thief who caused an uproar in the town after being single-handedly responsible for a crime wave in Springfield, where he leaves quite literally a calling card, like the true legends do. This man was so good, he called into Kent Brockman's show and told him he was going to rob the museum. and still accomplished it even with heightened security. And even after he got arrested, he tricks the town into going on a wild goose chase so he can escape. While this man was an interesting villain who stirred up the whole town, he is still just a thief. So he gets the number 15 spot. Number 14 is
Mr. Black.
He was the person put in charge of Camp Krusty, which of course tormented children. To the point they made a sequel episode years later, just focusing on the trauma of Camp Krusty. Now one could argue that Krusty should be blamed for what happened at the camp. And he should have some blame. But when Krusty found out what happened, he was remorseful and made it up to the kids in the end. This did not happen with
Mr. Black.
And while he didn't directly do any of the torment himself, he was still in charge and knew exactly what was going on.
I thought you said you broke their spirits.
We did!
You broke nothing.
So while you didn't see a lot of him, he is the villainy of Camp Krusty.
Mr. Black, another brandy.
Gentlemen, to evil.
Number 13 is Mr. Lassen. This was a new teacher brought in to replace Mrs. Krabappel. And like I said earlier, this man is a complete psychopath. I mean, here's how he was introduced.
Now, going to Springfield Elementary. Hey, God have mercy. Seymour, your new teacher is... Everybody pray!
This is a public school.
I said pray!
This guy was made to be someone you shouldn't mess around with. And Bart, of course, fucked around and found out. When he was actively tortured in class, being electrocuted, with Mr. Lassen setting the mode to agonizing. And later in the episode, he tries to kill Bart. Then almost frees Sideshow Bob from prison, so they could team up and kill Bart. But Bob turned him down because he didn't want to share in the gutting of Bart. And I didn't even get to the worst part of Mr. Lassen. He enjoys going to Burning Man. He is nothing but a monster. Number 12 is Jessica Lovejoy. This young girl is arguably the most evil child depicted on The Simpsons. Jessica Lovejoy is a master manipulator, controlling boys like they were her playthings, to the point that even though Bart understands the situation he's in, he couldn't stop himself from doing her bidding. Now, the only actual crime she committed was stealing money, but it was from the church collection plate, the church her family runs. This just shows one obvious fact to me. Nothing is sacred to Jessica Lovejoy. It's actually a shame that after her first appearance, she became only a background character, because she would make a great continuous problem for Bart. She could just keep constantly causing him problems, and he keeps coming back to her. But she was voiced by Meryl Streep, so she hasn't spoken since, even though they replaced other guest star voices, like Krusty's daughter. But at least we have this episode, and she is a great villain. Number 11 is the Movementarians. This group was a great showing by The Simpsons of how much a cult can mess with not just a family, but an entire community. They get their grasp into Springfield and they do not let go, until Marge saves the day. And this wasn't a group of people thinking they were doing good. In their recruitment process, they literally say they're trying to break people's will to join the cult. They exceed at brainwashing everyone, and made it almost impossible to leave them. I mean, look at these hazards. And the only thing the leader wanted in the end was money. It was all about money. Nobody mattered except for him and his wallet. Number 10 is Cecil Terwilliger. He's on this list for two main reasons. First, he assisted his brother in trying to burn Bart alive. Yeah, hardcore. Second, and the bigger reason he's ranked so high, is he intentionally built the Springfield Dam to fail, wanting to flood the entire town and pocket all the money from the building project, during which he tried to murder his brother, Bart, and Lisa. And while he was foiled and arrested, the dam still collapsed because of his shoddy work, causing the town to flood, which at the very least had to have caused millions in damages. And even though the show wouldn't have brought this up because it was too dark, the flood probably killed many people in the process. So yeah, this dude belongs in the top 10. Number 9 is Snake Jailbird. Easily one of the most iconic criminals in Springfield. When the Simpsons need a bad guy doing bad things, they bring in the Jailbird. However, the reason he isn't higher on this list is because there are very few moments where he is the main villain of the episode. There have been some episodes, but they're few and far between. He's mostly just doing background crimes unrelated to the plot of the episode. But he does have a laundry list of crimes, including armed robbery, mugging, breaking and entering, scamming, grand theft auto, assault, kidnapping, attempted murder, and murder, which has only ever been mentioned and never seen except for in Treehouse of Horrors. So yeah, this is a bad dude. Number 8 is Lindsay Naegle. While not often depicted as a criminal per se, Lindsay Naegle commonly represents corporate evil and has been the main villain in several episodes, mostly when greedy companies come in and mess with Springfield. Some notable things she's done is ruin the church of ads and sponsorships, bribe Kent Brockman to keep his mouth shut when he's speaking ill of the Republican Party, lead a political group to remove government assistance to children and their families, and take control of the school to use children as a focus group, which led to them making Funzo. Whereas she was thrilled when people were getting trampled to get the toy. She was also a jewel thief who betrayed her heist group to get all the gems. And she might be a T-1000. Number 7 is Lyle Lanley. This is the suave con man that tricked Springfield into creating the monorail. Much like Cecil Terwilliger, his true goal was to pocket all the town's money and leave them with the ruin that would come from his unsafe creation. While Springfield didn't end in disaster, that can't be said for the other 3 towns he did this con to, where we see one of them is practically destroyed, with people living there like it's a post-apocalypse. But he gets his in the end.
Folks, this is your captain speaking. Our non-stop flight to Tahiti will be making a brief layover in North Haverbrook.
North Haverbrook. Where have I heard that name before? Oh, no.
Oh no!
There he is! Seat 3F!
Number 6 is Fat Tony. Of course Fat Tony had to be high on this list. He's the leader of the Mafia in Springfield. When the show needs a low-level criminal, you get Snake. When they need a high-level criminal, you get Fat Tony. And unlike Snake, the Mafia has been seen to murder people on the show. And their crimes don't stop at murder. They've committed arson, terrorism, political corruption, smuggling, and racketeering. And even though the show did Fat Tony dirty with Fit Tony, he is still one of the show's greatest villains. Number 5 is Costas Becker. Not only is this one of the most intimidating characters the show ever presented, but one of the most evil. Chief Wiggleman said this about Becker.
Satan himself has come to this town, and I'm not man enough to take him on. If you see Lou, tell him Eddie's chief now.
He is a debt collector who mercilessly hunts down his targets, killing anybody that gets in his way, including the Mafia, which ended with the horrific death of Fat Tony when he turned his head into a donut. Now, of course, he is a non-canonical figure, but this isn't a Treehouse episode. Things aren't over the top and wacky with the murders. This was all taken very seriously, and his appearance being non-canonical just means they made him as awful as possible. This is what it means to be a top-tier villain. Number 4 is Russ Cargill. This is the main villain of the Simpsons movie, and they didn't pull punches for this movie. Except for not having Hank Scorpio as the main villain. You cowards. Of course, he's responsible for putting the dome over Springfield, which wasn't put in gingerly, and killed at least one person. Even though his death happened because he was an idiot, it's still on Cargill. Not that he would actually care anyway, because he was going to blow up the entire town, killing everyone, and mocking them about it in the process. Now that's a villain move. Number 3 is Hank Scorpio. If you think Simpsons villains and Hank Scorpio doesn't come to your mind, then you haven't seen Hank Scorpio. Much like Dr. Colossus, he is an actual supervillain, but instead of a comic book supervillain, he's a parody of James Bond villains. And he actually kills the Simpsons version of James Bond, with the help of Homer. Thanks, Homer. Not only did he threaten the UN with a doomsday device, he also conquered the East Coast, all while being an amazing boss and great friend. Hank Scorpio is one of the best villains ever, and easily belongs in the top 3. Number 2 is Sideshow Bob. One of the oldest and best villains of the show. He has done numerous horrible things. It all just started with a simple framing of Krusty, before immediately jumping to the attempted murder of Selma. Hell, just like Russ Cargill, he also planned to blow up the town. However, his bomb turned out to be a dud. But he didn't know that and pushed the detonator. And he also just flat out blew up part of Springfield, launching a rocket at a sculpture garden, which exploded and assumably killed multiple people. And of course, he tried to kill Bart numerous times, and could have easily have done it on 2 different occasions. One time he didn't do it just because he decided he liked the hunting of Bart instead, and the second time was when he was just done with Bart. Yes, Bart is only alive because of the good graces of Sideshow Bob. Now that's a villain. And now we get to number 1. And the greatest Simpsons villain is Mr. Burns. Of course, it had to be Mr. Burns. Really, how could it be anyone else? Not only has he been an over-the-top supervillain, like when he blocked out the sun, but he's also done numerous evil actions as a man of business. When he heard fish getting caught in those plastic bottle holders, he decided to use those holders to farm fish and turn them into feed. When he heard there was a cult in town, the only thing he questioned was, where's my cult? Lisa once said he clear-cut a forest just because he thought a squirrel was looking at him funny. And of course we get this moment.
I cannot be stopped. Kill his acorns and make him watch.
This man has had numerous people killed, personally tried to kill many people, has kidnapped people, has poached and eaten endangered animals, 6 dogs on people regularly, hit Bart with a car and said Bart was the problem here. He is one of the worst polluters in the world, has forced children to work for him, claimed to have killed all his relatives, and has even stolen $1 trillion from the government. The show has shown numerous times a softer side to Mr. Burns, but there's nothing they could do to undo this man's evil. He is the king of all villains, a true villain's villain, and fully deserves the number 1 spot. And that's the 20 greatest Simpson villains. If you have a different opinion, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have an idea for a video you would like to see, I'd love to hear that too. If you like this video, why not check out some of my other videos I did recently? If you really like this video and want to support us, consider becoming a patron, like these great people. If not, a like and subscribe goes a long way. Thanks for watching.